My name is Gautam. I lead data and AI at a pet food company called The Farmer's Dog. I'm here to moderate the panel, Data Perspective and Action. Too often, data engineering teams have an interesting paradox. You're both indispensable and also invisible at the same time. You have business stakeholders asking the metrics, are they right? Are the pipelines running? I mean, they don't ask about pipelines. They ask about why is this data wrong or incorrect? And often the missing layer is the middle layer between data and action. That's the perspective. That's what we're going to talk about today. We have panelists from some of the world's most forward-looking data companies in the world. We have Mick from Netflix, Shri from Meta, and Monisha from Apple. I'd like to welcome you all, and let's have the panel. Thank you. Mick, do you want to start off with the introductions?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Mick Dreeling. I'm a director of data science and engineering for games at Netflix. I've been there now for about 7 years. Before that, I worked in video games, banking, telecoms, and I'm originally from Ireland. I came here in about 2008, so I've been in the States for a little while now. And yeah, I'm excited to be on this panel.
Amazing. Monisha?
Hi, I'm Monisha. I lead the Siri user experience metrics team at Apple. Before that, I was at Netflix working on content data, and I worked before that at startups that got acquired. And if folks here remember MySpace, I don't know if folks are of that era.
Sure.
I worked at MySpace back in the day, and I'm really happy to be here and be a part of this panel.
Amazing. Great.
I'm Shri. I work at Meta. I've been there for almost 14 years now. And Meta killed MySpace. No, but I wasn't a part of it. I'm a senior tech lead. These days, I'm working on the context ecosystem for the AI data stack, building a semantic layer, and the rest of the context that makes analytics happen. Before Meta, I was a software engineer. So yeah, I'm very excited to be in this panel today.
Amazing. Let's start off with the heart of what this panel is. There is a gap between data and actions, and most data engineering teams are really good at moving models and building the infrastructure, but often sometimes struggle at having a seat at the table or influencing decisions.
Yeah.
What in your experience is, or have great teams done better, and what are some of the gaps?
Yeah, directly getting to the heart of this panel. Yeah, so first I want to acknowledge that going from moving data to modeling to influencing is a journey. It's a crawl, walk, run journey. So there is some amount of time you have to give to crawling and walking. Without the foundation, you can't influence, obviously. But then what happens is eventually teams get stuck in the crawl and walk stage, where they're continuously optimizing the data foundation, and then they're not plugged into the business. And so that's where some amount of what you mentioned, like trust gap or communication gap happens. And good teams that influence bridge that gap by understanding what the business needs, understanding what the company and leadership priorities are, and then proactively trying to build things that speak to that, and then even driving those insights, things that they did not ask for, and that's how you build that trust. So drawing on my example, I just joined Facebook Search several years ago, and one of the first things we did was we proved that there was a quality and retention problem with the search product back then. And it was successful because they realized that they needed to make a big change to the product, and today's search experience came out of that war room-like effort. But I remember meeting the head of engineering for Facebook Search, and he told me that I was the first data engineer he had ever met. He was from Google. He was like, so you have to first explain to me what is data engineering. So I was a little bit surprised myself that we didn't have a seat at the table.
Right.
And so, so drawing on that experience, so the data has the capability to influence the business, but I think the focusing on where the business problems are, especially in this AI era, I think that's the most important thing for teams to know, to go and be able to influence decisions.
Thank you. Makes sense. Mick, do you want to draw up on this?
Yeah, I think Sri is probably hitting on something there with, especially in this AI era. Like, I feel like where data engineers tend to excel is on understanding the data model, the nuances of the grains, the right way things should be queried, the right way that things should be, gathered together to present something. And so they're collaborating with folks maybe that are building the dashboards and trying to like get that business value out. But I guess what we're seeing now is maybe it's a little bit, we're seeing more democratization of dashboarding and other kind of tasks. So a data engineer being in the room when somebody is saying like, hey, I'm seeing this business metric and I'm going to make a decision on it, I think we need to be able to see what it is that they're making business decisions on. So building those relationships with people so that they kind of bring you in and say, hey, listen, I had this agent do this thing. And then for a data engineer to be there and like, well, I see what it did. I'm not so sure that's what you were trying to get it to do. That's really an important step now that I feel like data engineering becomes more important, because understanding the data model, understanding what the agent is going to do is a really important step in understanding if the results of what AI is producing are actually valid. So it's a crucially important step to try and see like how can data engineering become more visible.
Staying in the rooms or earning space in the rooms is critical to helping drive influence. Monisha, what has been your experience?
I think what Shri mentioned earlier kind of resonates with me. I think he mentioned the point of like gaining trust. So I do see data teams as influencing decision making through building trust. And trust is built by, I think, like main three pillars. So one is making sure your data systems are reliable, they're strong, they have the underlying supporting data that's delivered on time, is trustworthy, and then having really solid North Star metrics that the business as a whole agrees upon, and there's consistent alignment throughout the organization that these are the key metrics we work on. And there's also the need for alignment with our leaders to make sure like these are the metrics, and educate and partner with the leadership to make sure that these metrics have the necessary visibility and focus from leadership. So I think like depends on each organization and where they are, I think, between these three pillars. For example, if the data systems aren't foundationally ready, then it's hard to really build trust if the reports aren't ready or they're of poor quality. And so I think strengthening each of these pillars depending on the organization, depending where it needs attention, I think is really important to then take that data and bring it to the final stage of influencing with being in the room, like Mick mentioned earlier, so that you know what the questions that are being asked to be able to provide the supporting evidence.
Awesome. What I'm drawing upon this is pipelines are relatively easier to build, trust isn't. And once pipelines break, we all can get up and fix them or auto-heal them, but trust, not so much. And it's important to be carefully crafted. Cool, let's get to the question of the hour in general about AI. Like in the age of AI, when humans are maybe a little bit lagging in the speed in terms of what AI could do, but not necessarily on everything, how should data engineering think about its impact? What is the net impact of data engineering, and how would you navigate in the age of AI? Monisha, you want to go?
Yeah, so I think that is the question of the moment, right? Like, which is like, how are we all thinking about AI? And I would say like we're in the middle of it, right. Which is like we're still trying to figure out what this means for our individual teams, on how they adopt it. And I imagine this is one of several inflection points. So we don't know how far this is going to go, but we are kind of really embracing it in the meantime. So day to day, I think engineers across the board are relying on agentic tools to accelerate their workflows. You use it for testing, to accelerate your coding, to prototype faster, to be able to turn from a data perspective, dashboards and pipelines, things that probably took like weeks in previous years to prototype is now happening more quickly, and the business expectation is also evolving around these as agentic workflows become a part of our day-to-day. That being said, I do think that the context that individual engineers and teams bring based on the business, understanding what is important to the business, still really influences and still really adds that touch on what are the right questions to be asking to be able to shape that. So, the world is really changing, but I think like the perspective and the context that an engineer or an individual has based on the business, remains paramount.
Mick, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking a lot about this very, recently, and as soon as like we figured out we could do things more efficiently. There's a lot of areas where I think where data engineering is probably going to change it, change a little bit, and maybe the focus changes a little bit on what we're doing. So the way I think about it is, if you think about data engineering organizations, it is different company to company, but if you try and boil it off a little bit, you have golden data sets that are trustable. You can answer these business questions, and the data is as trustable as we can possibly get it. Above that, you've got your dashboards, trustable dashboards. So if you want to run your business off of this, we're accountable for it. We're guaranteeing to some degree that this is a trustable dashboard. You should run your business off this dashboard. Then we've got testing, experimentation. We have ad hoc research. And again, I think of all of this as golden. So the team's sort of output is, look, you can run your business off of this test to some degree. You can run your business off of this dashboard, this data. Where I feel like we may be headed is more in the space, and I saw this in one of the Airbnb presentations, of like golden agents, right? So if you can guarantee to some degree that this agent is less probabilistic and more deterministic in answering a business question, that's actually a hard problem to solve, especially if the agents are collaborating. So when it comes to data engineering, I feel like that there's maybe an investment there in thinking about what layer are you providing in this new world, and if it's a golden agent, that's the next step to, for your sort of data engineering organization, where you're making it so that your business stakeholders, they have two options. They can spin up Cloud Code and they can point it at your repo, and it'll generate 600-line SQL statements that may or may not be correct, or they can start building UIs and then they call it to your MCP, right? And your MCP is 85, 90, whatever you can get it to, more guaranteed to answer the right question than a sort of a vibe-coded version of it, which still has value, but the accountability is probably on the data engineering team to be like, this is correct, right, to the best of our ability, and then keep iterating on that until you get those percentages higher.
Right. So the through line being building determinism through these probabilistic systems. But what you mentioned is golden data sets, golden dashboards, and golden agentic systems or golden agents. That's a good take. Sri, what is your take?
Yeah, no, I agree with both Monisha and Mick. One part of it is we'll see different inflections happening throughout the next few years. And then the other part is, how does the role change given that for data engineering? I think from an inflection point of view, there will be a lot of making our systems ready for AI. And the other part is for data engineers to become more AI native, to be able to use these systems. So that'll be a lot of what will happen this year and next year. So I think data engineers will be doing a lot of that, because I don't think all of a sudden some other role can know what another role does. Like a data engineer can suddenly not become a great PM, in my opinion, just because you have agents at your hand, and vice versa for all these roles. So I feel like this year and next year will be a lot of making your systems ready for AI, and data engineers will be at the thick of things, because we are the ones who have been building and owning the data. That is not going to change. But then very soon it'll shift to what we've been talking about, which is the perspective, because the expectation is that you have an agent and that you can ask any amount of questions to that agent. And it should move from the spectrum from determinism to non-determinism, because non-determinism is also a good feature to have. because that's what will give you the novelty effect of, actually doing true analysis, right?
Right.
So that experience is expected out of just a chat box-like interface. So that's where the true power of data is going to be exposed, and that's an expectation that all CEOs will have. There is nothing you can do about it.
Right.
That's the expectation.
Right.
Right? And so, and you'll just keep having these conversations and keep getting to deeper and deeper aspects of the data.
Right.
So I feel like as long as this infra readiness and whatever AI native work will do, which will offload a lot of what we do by hand to agents, then data engineers will have to figure out how do they ensure that they are part of that democratization of data,
Right.
such that it leads to that great experience that all product leaders want. And so you'll have to keep aligning yourself to that, where all this, like Mick said, the making things more golden, etc., will be a given.
Right.
But then that experience is where you need to look for, and the AI is making the data engineering role change
Right.
from that point of view. So yeah.
Awesome. I have two follow-ups based on this.
Yeah.
One that you just mentioned about CEOs' expectation of not just what data engineers can build, but the holistic system itself, thinking about the experience. But do you think that's just data engineers should be thinking? Are there adjacent roles that need data engineers to collaborate in terms of building these chatbots or interfaces?
Well, I mean, these days building any tool is easy. Anyone can build it with AI. Like it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be a software engineer. A data engineer can build it. A data scientist can build it. But I do think that the unique IP of what we are trying to build is with data engineers and data scientists, right? I was talking to a friend of mine. He's here, Gabriel. He works at OpenAI, and I've talked to others who work at Anthropic also. One of the things they're trying to do is to have, when other companies, other organizations use their agents, they want to see how the domain expertise can come out of the box with these agents, right? Like if you think about what Anthropic has today, Anthropic is asking people to do is invest in skills, right? And so why are they asking people to invest in skills when they have a model that has sucked up all the general knowledge of everything that can exist? Can it not know who a marketing analyst is to extract that skill out?
Right.
But that's the type of domain knowledge that they cannot just scale, because that requires some amount of fine tuning, reinforcement learning, and things like that, right? So essentially there is a unique IP that data scientists and data engineers bring, which is the more important thing, not the tool itself. Like you can build a chatbot, but that unique IP will still be owned by data engineers and data scientists. And there, at least from a meta perspective, I see that both are working together to build this, you can call this like AI readiness, but they are both bringing it in very unique ways. It's not like the data scientist is suddenly, because they have access to AI, they're suddenly saying things that a data engineer is like, oh man, I used to do this, now you can do it? No, it's not happening that way.
Right.
That domain expertise is still, is clearly the IP. That I don't see going away.
Sense. Mick or Monisha, do you have any thoughts on what adjacent roles should data engineer collaborate with to bring in this holistic experience?
Yeah, so I do see there's like a blurring of lines that's happening, where folks are now empowered to create their own tools, explore data. But that being said, there's still like the necessary guardrails that are needed from the subject matter experts to be able to interpret the data with the correct context in mind, to be actually at the end of the day influencing a decision. I think, if you're making a business decision that's based on like sort of really solid insights that has had a thorough vetting, then I think that still needs to be like a subject matter expert. And I think, but having said that, like to be able to do ad hoc analysis, to be able to turn around the things that we want to do really quickly, I think that's still valuable and teams are empowered. But the context that the data engineer and the analyst still brings is super important. So I see that continuing to persist.
Got it.
Yeah. I would agree. I'd agree generally. I think there's a definite shifting in how in how we collaborate and who we collaborate with. I think it's probably different in each company. Netflix has a DE, analytics engineering and data science. So I think DE and AE are collaborating a lot to figure out, well, okay, like what would be the best way to create an agentic solution here? Because you know the data model and how you built it exactly and what grain it's been put together at. The AE knows what the upstream tables that create the ags and that may also have interesting grain, semantics, what they look like. So if we're going to build an MCP, we're going to build some agentic solution, we have to kind of work together to figure out, like, how is this thing not going to, constantly hallucinate? So it can be used for business, to create a business outcome. The additional piece of collaboration, I would say, though, because of the democratization of dashboarding, is probably with engineering, and we even saw this today in some Slacks that I was having with some DEs and AEs. Engineering, pure engineering, software engineering ops now, typically, I think, they would have been able to build, they're sort of like Kibana dashboards that tell them, like, where things are going for their services, right? But now they can actually, create metrics out of Elasticsearch queries and things like that. And those metrics may not necessarily correlate with the business view of that, because you're talking about deduplication and validation and auditing that would happen on the DEA side. So you have these engineering metrics which are getting more sophisticated. They might have a connection rate metric that's on the left here in engineering. And then you might have a connection metric that's downstream in your pipelines that goes to a business dashboard. And these are not going to line up, right? So I feel like the Ds and As are also going to probably move closer to collaborating with the engineers as they get more sophisticated with, like, I can calculate metrics now, very complex metrics. And so, okay, but where's your data source for that? Are you talking to your own data source, or do you want to talk to my MCP? Because I can give you the golden view of that, so we both can have the same connection metric, and it's exactly the same. And I think that that's a collaboration that has to happen as well, because we're getting that more democratization of where engineering teams can really self-serve this stuff. It might not match up with this other world, which is kind of where we live.
So I see, like, builders, more general, getting closer to the domains, and that is a good duo structure to empower in the age of AI. Another follow-up that I had is, what capabilities should people build as AI is developing? Like, not just technical, I mean, obviously technical too, but just think more expansive about both technical and non-technical skills. So all of us can build as we are resetting our careers, or if there are people who are just starting off data engineering, what should they focus on? You want to go, Shri?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's the key question, right? That's top of mind for everyone. Yeah, so I'll just start off with what I just said earlier. I think there is an expectation that the data and its use is democratized. So therefore, so that's how data will get consumed, and decisions will get made based on that. But on the where data gets produced, we should expect that a lot of the mundane work is all done by AI agents now, right? So what we are left with is really the use of data, because that's the only thing that matters now, right? So I see, like, two types of work that the future of, in my opinion, I think it's across all functions, in my opinion, this is the case, but definitely the case for data engineering. There will be two types of work. One is given that producing assets and things like that is going to be incidental, agents will do it, then knowing the business perspective and conceptualizing it and asking the right questions of the business is how the work itself will shift to, essentially, like something like a markdown, essentially. That'll be the input which will create assets, right? So that's basically where we will go. So whatever that markdown is has to have all the things that Mick and Monisha mentioned about asking the right questions, conceptualizing your data, thinking about the golden, structure of the data, etc. So that's where it will go. The other thing that I think people will do is invest heavily in evals, Why? Because eval is the goal that we aspire to, and agents will just ensure that on one end, whatever you conceptualize gets created.
Right.
On the other end, where it gets used, these goals will essentially drive improvement, continuous improvement of that context, right? That leads to the outcomes, essentially, right? So which is basically like, eval is essentially asking the right question, right? So this is how I see the role shifting, because I think everything else can be, we are already seeing that at Meta. Everything is already going to get done by agents, okay?
Right.
So yeah, so I just, one more thing I'll add. So that's where I think the role is going, and I think it's going to be true for pretty much all all functions across the knowledge economy. These are the only two things. So my advice, you didn't ask for that, but I will give. My advice is, this makes it really hard for the junior people, because there is an experience that we have for asking these questions about the business, so it's a little bit hard for them. But yeah, so my advice in general is, learn, go and get some degree on like, business administration and things like that. I have benefited from doing MBA. I didn't realize back then, because I was a software engineer, I didn't think it was useful. But actually, now I see like why it is useful, because then you think business, and that is a skill you'll need to have. So maybe get some vocational training on that. So that's one thing I'll just say we should do. The other is like train yourself to ask like real good questions. And some of it you can learn from using agents, but definitely train yourself on that and understand the product, which is basically what this panel is about. Last thing I will say, it's a funny thing, not a dig at Databricks, but this morning a lot of the time was spent on how to use tools to do things, but then eventually we ended by saying that, tool is just incidental, that will just be taken care of by AI, right? So essentially, that's basically where we are going. So you need to know that that's happening.
Right, right. So it's knowing goals, the constraints around it, and then being really good at evals or evaluating things, which falls under the domain expertise, understanding business. Any challenges to this or different perspective?
I have a story maybe that just to bounce off the validation piece that Shri just called there. I think that the validation side of data engineering is going to become very complex and very much an area that we're going to have to we might spend a lot of our time there. So just on the story of it, we have MCP agents and platforms at Netflix, and I looked at some of the. I was at Jerry's talk this morning about Airbnb about the system for conversational UI, and just I'll caveat this with this is a very sort of prototype stage of say a conversational UI. But as we were setting up this conversational UI, I was messing around with it and I was talking with it, and I asked it what was the DAO for the last 7 days, and it comes back and it gave me the DAO for what was going on with that particular business unit for the last 7 days, and then I realized that the platform backend was down, and so I asked it. I said, how are you giving me the DAO for the last 7 days if the Cradle API is unavailable? And it said, I'm sorry. We had a conversation earlier where I gave you the DAO for the last 7 days, or 2 days ago, so I projected out tomorrow's DAO, and I gave you the DAO for Wednesday and Thursday, just from our memory. And I literally typed that. I said, I'm sorry. And I was like, why would you do that? And so then we get into a conversation about, why would you do that if the API is down? And of course we had and I think that's a simple guardrail on the prompt to tell it to not, not lie. But if you go further out, we probably need to get these validation systems, and we're red teaming the agent, and there's an agent telling us, hey, listen, we talked with that bot that you put together, and it just gave me DAO for the last 7 days when the Cradle API is down. So you might want to look into that. And that's a whole sort of validation phase of what do we do when we have these conversational UIs, and how do we engineer validation into these systems, because they're going to the same way that we share dashboards and they go out to everybody. and then people share the dashboards and share the dashboards. The same is going to happen with the conversational agent. It's going to go, this thing is amazing. I asked it for DAO for the last 7 days. It gave it to me in 2 seconds. You know, and then it's going to be like people running off and using that to make business decisions. So if we don't have good validation steps in this, it's going to be problematic, and we're going to have to, DEs, I think, and AEs are going to be very helpful in being like, hey, listen, we built a red team agent that's going to go against this thing, and whatever you asked it yesterday, it's probably accurate.
That certainty is where I think we all can bring in a lot more clarity into the systems we build like that. Monisha, you had a unique perspective on what capabilities that engineers need to build on.
Yeah. So I agree with what Mick and Shri mentioned about investing in eval. Like, we're building products, we're building eval to make sure like our products are working for our expectations, investing in guardrails to make sure that the data that's eventually shared makes sense, is grounded. I think like my kind of response is like a non-technical response, and I think I'm looking at for like a relentless problem solving. So as our kind of the ground that we're on is shifting, I expect that the folks who will be really successful will be like willing to roll up their sleeves and kind of dig into problems. And I've seen that in organizations that I've been in. You have senior distinguished engineers or really staff engineers kind of finding what the problems are. It could be some little hacky thing that they have to do in order to make things work, and coming with humility and coming with a problem-solving mindset to be able to say, like, this is the problem the business is facing. This is not something that needs to take months, or we don't need to have a roadmap for it. This is something that can be solved over a few days, and I can do it. And just like going and solving the problem and adding value. I think so. I really think that the mindset of like problem solving and optimism is, I think, something that will be useful for all of us as we navigate this changing landscape.
Amazing. Problem solving with optimism is something that we all can carry forward. You also mentioned about the long tail problems. Can you elaborate a little bit about it?
Yeah, so as access to data and tooling becomes more democratized, there is acceleration that individuals get in order to solve immediately the problem that they have in front of them. And historically, what has happened is that engineers are usually running short on time, and so they're focusing on the top and most impactful issues and being able to do analysis on it. Now that you have capacity to be able to work with your coding agent or agentic tool of choice to figure out like what is the iteration lifestyle look like, ask it to review code and generate insights, you have the opportunity to kind of dig a little bit deeper into the data and find those underlying trends in those corner cases in that long tail that was previously unnoticed. So I really think that this empowers what eventually data and analytics like brings to the table is to find those hidden insights, those hidden trends that the business values but may not immediately even know to shape a question or to answer a question. So that's, I really think, like this allows us to go after those.
Great perspective. I think this will already causing an explosion of the long tail, but you're really finding the quality from those long tail and improving our chances of bumping into luck or those hidden insights is something that is very powerful, a capability that we can all build in this age. I'll wrap up with the last question, and then we'll have some audience questions. What org structures would enable value for data engineering organizations? Is it a central structure, a federated structure, reporting into a business? What have you seen that works?
I think it's going to depend on I don't think there's a perfect answer for this, because it's going to really depend on the business. I think if you try to plan an organizational structure, or you try to force an organizational structure, it's like data's first, right? DEs should be at every table, that AEs and everything. That's probably set you up for failure, depending on the business that you're in. We really have to think about, what is it that serves the business, and what does the business care about? And that probably also matters in terms of, where people want to take their careers. Because if you want to be a DE and an AE and you want to be close to, the business, or you want to be sitting at the table, then you sort of also have to pick the right companies, right? Because not every company is going to be data first, right? Or it might not even be necessary. It might be ancillary to look at the data. I think, ads is probably a great example. I think ads is very data driven. And so there's likely to be very data savvy people invited to almost everything. But in in certain types of company, then that might not be the culture, and it might not be the way that they see the value in data, and then it's harder to sort of like push uphill and to set up an organizational structure where the data engineering director is like always at the business meetings or something like that. But I think we're going to get there though over time with AI. But I think for now it's a case of trying to make sure that from a career perspective, people do kind of like think about like where they want to go and what kind of companies they want to work for, because those companies that are data first are going to set up things that way anyway.
Right.
So.
Awesome. Monisha, what's your take?
I agree. There isn't a one-size-fits-all. And it really depends on what you're trying to optimize for. So for example, if you're closer to a product team or you're closer to a vertical, by nature of being in discussions with stakeholders on what's important to them, you get the necessary context, you're able to anticipate the questions that are going to come as a part of just being in the room, and you can start planning for that, and there's definitely benefits of that. And there's also benefits of having teams that may not be sitting directly with the vertical, but that serve common shared needs across verticals. And then there's the more centralized view, and then there's the more kind of like you're embedded with your individual teams, but you have dotted lines so that you're sharing best practices and you're not like reinventing the wheel and creating duplicate systems and duplicate tools, and then the things don't align. So I think there's value in both, and it's really trying to figure out like what is the problem that we're trying to solve here for. Are you optimizing for common shared practices? Are you optimizing for velocity to move quickly, to be able to really embed it with your business logic and context there? So unfortunately, I don't think there's a one answer, one size fits all, but it really depends on each business and where they're at.
Makes sense. Sri, wrap it up.
Yeah. I again have to say I agree with both Mick and Monisha here, but I'll try to give quickly two perspectives. One is historically what has happened, and then again trying to be also saying something about what I'm seeing today, given AI. But historically, what we have seen is, yes, there's no one size fits all, but the centralized versus federated is a reflection of the maturity. If you are an early product or company, then things tend to be centralized because you're building the function, and so you need some amount of closure to the best practices and stuff like that. And then eventually it tends to become federated because now you become more influential, you need a seat at the table, and you become larger. So that's basically the general trend historically. But now, also tying to the previous conversation we were having, things are going to be, companies are going to experiment on the right structure, but I feel like there are three players in this evolving stack. One, you have the domain SME. This person knows a lot about the product and the domain. You have the builder. This is the person who is building things such that domain SMEs can use them at scale. And then you have the foundational model providers, right? The builders will see what is happening, and then they'll ensure that the domain SMEs and their workflows are being automated, right? So this is the thing that I'm seeing. And so within that, then companies, of course, not every company is building the foundational model.
Right.
So you have these two other players, right, which is the domain SMEs, and then you have the AI, people who are ahead of others in terms of their usage and adaptability of AI, right? So I see a lot of like then centralization of the AI builders, right? Because that's like the same as the previous point, which is where you're building a culture and best practice. So AI builders will probably become more centralized, and the domain SMEs will probably remain federated or centralized, again, depending on the maturity. So that's basically how I see happening. But this year is going to be a lot of experimentation. And then, I don't know, next year is where people will realize, oh, we went too far. So companies are trying to, I think, in my opinion, and maybe Mick or Monisha know more, I'm not an org leader, but I think companies are trying to see the boundaries of what they can, how much they can play with, right? And then they'll probably settle down into some structure next year forward. But that's how I see this changing.
Great perspective.